So I'm at the library and had a tough night of sleep, a good 5 hours and 46 minutes, but I came to one conclusion. I think I will be sticking with not the London, but with my King's Pawn repertoire so that the demonstrations, or I guess the demo games that I show, are more or well-rounded, since my good friend John, he's a Queen's Pawn player. King's Pawn. All right. All right. This game was my attempt at bringing back my King's Pawn after a short venture into the world of the London system. Um, and it was a pretty sharp game too, because we played a Sicilian, not just any Sicilian. We played the what was it? The Sveshnikov, uh, high caliber defense. So I'll go probably about 21, maybe 22 moves into this game. It was a rapid game, a pretty good rapid game, because I think my accuracy was somewhere around 89. So the game started e4, c5, straight into the Sveshnikov. Now I'm usually okay with playing the Rossolimo, but I didn't think that would be sharp enough for the demonstration. So I went with one of my old favorites, d4. So after knight d to b5, the threat is bringing the knight to d6, trading off, forcing a trade of bishop for knight, and just controlling those key squares, d6 and mostly d5. But usually my opponent does not provoke knight to d6. He just takes the time to prevent knight to d6 with d6 himself. So after d6, we have some options. I've played bishop to g5 irregularly, but I think my whole reason for not playing that in the past had been sort of like its theoretical depth. Although, see, it might be on my agenda for the future. I've been very comfortable playing knight to d5. I like the positions. So we get knight to d5, knight takes, e takes, and he has two options, either bringing his knight back to b8 or bringing his knight to e7. Um, both are kind of interesting. I actually had an interesting game with knight to e7. Like after e5, this was a game in Nebraska, but after knight to e7, um, my opponent, he was rated like 1700, probably like 1717, I believe. And after e7, I immediately went for like c4 to attack along that diagonal, and he just gave it to me with g6, which I think is a big mistake, because after g6, I played queen to a4, making a threat of the discovery with knight moves somewhere, takes rook, and he actually decided to solve that problem with knight to d7, or bishop to d7, which actually lost.
Mate.
With a smothered mate on d6, it was an excellent way to win for our first board. So it'd be nice if that happened, but it didn't happen. Instead, we went back to b8, and my opponent played knight to b8, a more common line, and I went to channel a little bit of Fabiano Caruana, and I went with pawn to a4. So I think the whole purpose of playing a4 over c4, is to free the c4 square up, just in case the knight's attacked. He could like reroute to c4, which I guess, gives him the benefit of pressuring d6. And then I think I've seen some places where like I'm sure it's not in this line, but where the bishop could also pressure d6, or even in some rare lines, the without the pawn on c4, this could allow like the rook to come to the c file and target c7. But there is a lot of uh, subtle points to a4, so I liked it. So after a4, we have bishop e7, bishop e2, and I deliberately held off on developing this bishop because I know in some lines black wants to trade, or in a lot of lines, I see black bringing his bishop to g5 to trade on c1, even if the bishop hadn't developed. So I wanted to, well, at least not lose any tempo by um, holding or keeping my bishop on c1. Also, I know that black likes to play like f5, f4, and try some direct king side attacking ideas with like queen e8, if or queen e8, queen to the king side, I'm not sure where, and then the rook could even go from f8 to f6, and it gets pretty messy. So to solve that whole problem of king side initiative, I always meet, and I think I did meet f5 with f4. So the game continued castles kingside, pawn to f5, surprise, surprise, and no surprise. f4 was played, and after a6, the knight is not going back to c3 because that would have completely refuted my whole a4 game plan and speech. I dropped my knight back to a3. And then when the pawn took on f4, I was delighted because actually I had to think a bit about this move when he took, because I knew that if I were to play bishop takes, I would be allowing or inviting the move queen to b6 and takes on b2. But I said to myself, after bishop f4, queen b6, king h1 takes on b2, I think I would have some pretty decent compensation after knight to c4, queen f6, and then possibly like knight to b6 with the idea of bringing the bishop back from f4 to e3 to target that rook that had been forced to a7. So it looked like I got some pretty good compensation. And if you're curious to what that might have looked like, I'll show you. So we have takes on f4, and if he went greed mode, it would be queen b6, king h1, queen takes on b2, knight c4, queen f6, knight b6, rook a7, and then bishop e3. And I'm not unhappy there. I'm down a pawn, but it doesn't look like it. So the game went g5, pretty aggressive. I dropped my bishop back to e3, and he still went total nuts on me with pawn to f4. I took my e3 bishop and brought it to d4 because d4 is an incredibly useful square. At this point, he played standard. I think bishop f4, trade these bishops off. I guess it's supposed to. I don't think the pawn structure really has any significance now for the keeping the bishops on the board, or because, well, I don't need to explain that. But it's probably as much of a loss to him losing his dark squared bishop as it would be for me. So I played knight to c4. He decided to play queen e7, and it looked pretty messy here because I think the tactic he was going for was bishop takes on d4, queen takes, and queen takes on e2. But I said to myself, hope. I said, I've been doing tactics for way too long to just pass up this opportunity to win material with knight to b6, and I tanked a little bit, probably about 40 seconds, and said, let's go. It's a rapid game. I'm not going to die if I lose this game. So knight to b6 was played, and he totally, like, I for sure thought he was going to play, or going to be forced to play a rook a7, and then just go for being the exchange down with bishop takes, queen takes on e2. But he really just neglected everything. He played knight to d7, knight takes on a8, and then after all the dust has cleared, he didn't even he didn't even want any part of the free bishop on e2. So he played knight e5, and clearly the game has went south for him. I mean, it did take me some time before I converted the game. I think I converted the game around move 50. It's only move 21, but the position pretty much plays itself. I have an extra rook, and I still have all the other advantages that I started with. So, nice Sveshnikov Sicilian dub, and I intend to get more of these tomorrow. I'm planning to go to a chess tournament, probably not playing myself, but watching my good friend John play against some, relative noobs, or relative, no, I don't think there's any people in that event that are probably over 1,500, so just having fun in Kansas City.